Oh. Ouch. Throughout August and September, I released 2 new books, specifically drum kit coordination patterns. They're 2 books in the same series. The red book is subtitled Funk and Rock, and the blue book is subtitled Jazz and Blues, and that gives you some indication as to what they contain. Today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what they are, what they contain, what they aim to do, and whether or not they might be for you, something that you might find useful. Essentially, both of these books were written with 2 purposes in mind. First of all, they were written as a teaching aid for myself. I found throughout the years of teaching, week in, week out, I was giving students the same sort of material, writing out the same sorts of exercises, printing out the same sorts of sheets, and emailing them through the same sort of resources. So I thought it would be a good idea to start collating all of this into a codified collection that would not completely revolutionize my teaching or anything like that, but simply make it much easier here in the studio for me to open the book to a certain page and work on a set of material that is part of the general curriculum that I teach. I find with new students, whether they are beginners, intermediate or advanced, we generally work through similar sorts of material to cover problems in their playing, especially with coordination. So both of these books contain material that I was working with regularly with students that helps them to see it, play it, and learn it very, very simply. The second purpose of these books was as a response to some complaints I was getting from students about how difficult they were finding certain pieces of coordination. There are, of course, a lot of books out there, some of them very, very well known, that tackle drum kit coordination. These are not new. This is something that's been going on for a long time, and there are some very valuable and very good books out there that are worth our consideration. However, something that seems to link many of those books is that they rely on a degree of visualization from the student. Here is a hi-hat pattern, here is a bass drum placement, here is a snare drum placement, now put them all together to create the pattern. And I found that for students who were perhaps young or inexperienced with this sort of approach, it was very, very difficult, if not impossible, for them to visualize and put together and work out the final pattern that they're being asked to play. So again, even though we were working through this material and I may have had the book on the music stand, myself or the student had to actually write out the finished product anyway. We still had to write out the final combination so that they could see exactly where the hi-hat goes and the bass drum and the snare drum against that. That's especially difficult when you have 4 limbs going, when you've got the right hand, left hand and both feet playing independent patterns to produce the overall groove. So, the idea with these books was to present codified sets of material that actually lays out where everything in the pattern goes. So there are many, many combinations in these books. They are sets of coordination patterns that provide a visual guide to show the student exactly where each limb is placed. So when you choose whichever style you're interested in, you will find hundreds of patterns in clearly laid out sets that walk you through. This is where the hi-hat goes. This is how the bass drum and snare drum line up against that. And there are all of the different permutations very clearly laid out for you. And in trying these with my students as I was developing these books, I found that I was getting students who were perhaps otherwise quite inexperienced, maybe beginners, maybe quite young, nevertheless being able to play some quite advanced patterns because it was very clearly written out for them on the stand. And that's precisely the point of these. So, who are they for and what precisely do they do? Well, I would suggest these are predominantly for 2 sorts of people. Number 1, they are for students who are sort of teaching themselves and trying to develop a greater level of coordination, who need to have all of that material and source material written out in front of them so that they can see it. If you are interested in learning jazz and blues and shuffles and things like that, the blue book might be of interest. If you're into funk, rock and fusion and things like that, the red book might be of interest. And as you work through the sets, you will find all of the relevant bass drum and snare drum permutations against the relevant ride cymbal and hi-hat patterns. You will find a wealth of material that will be challenging yet systematic, so you can work your way through it, get the bass drum moving against the unchanging hi-hat ostinato, get your snare drum moving against a basic groove, that sort of thing. Secondly, they are for teachers who often find themselves frustrated with the material that already exists. I'm not going to name any names because that would be really disrespectful, but some of the best books out there are simply too conceptual. They don't present the material clearly enough for an inexperienced student to actually see it and play it. So these books act as teaching aids for students and teachers who want to work through a high level of coordination material, but actually like to just be able to see it on the music stand so they can figure it out. So I've done some introductory videos on both of these. In the red book, I looked at some funk and fusion applications, moving the bass drum, moving the snare drum, and some linear applications. And from the blue book, I did some jazz application, but it is worth stating this is not a jazz book. I had a question recently from somebody who said, very fairly, why should I use your blue book instead of something like John Riley's Fantastic Art of Bop Drumming? And that's a very, very valid question. This book, the blue one, is not a jazz book. It is a book of coordination patterns that contains jazz material. John Riley's Fantastic Art of Bop Drumming is a jazz book. It presents jazz-based patterns and phrases, but it also presents stylistic advice, concept, and analysis. So that is a book that is all about playing jazz on the drums. It's similar to my own Broken Time Drumming. That is a book of concept that addresses a particular style, a specific style. This one contains pages and pages and pages of material that are applicable and common in jazz, but it is not a jazz book. And that difference is quite difficult to describe. This is much more like a dictionary or a phrase book that can be applied to many, many different circumstances. John Riley's fantastic works are specific conceptual approaches to a style of music. So they suit different things. You absolutely should try both, I think, because they do different things. They are tools to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve. So free samples are available on the website for both of these to help you get an idea of whether or not they might be for you. And keep a lookout on my channel where I will keep putting out material demonstrating the concepts. But I wanted to just put out a clear, simple guide as to what they are, who they're for, and how they work. So for those of you that are interested, as I say, all of my material is available on the website. They all have free samples. You can get them physically or digitally anywhere in the world. They're really nice. I'm really pleased with them. And if nothing else, myself and my students are really enjoying working out of them. So I thought I would share that with you. So feel free to stop by the website and get in touch with any questions you may have or any feedback. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And I hope you enjoy working with these if you decide to check it out. Thanks very much.